Portraits are fun. Everybody loves to have their portrait drawn. I guess it's the ego in each of us that likes to see a likeness of ourselves drawn down on paper. And if you've ever seen a portrait artist on the beach or at the mall, he's always got a crowd around him. People enjoy seeing someone who has the knack to capture a likeness. Well, let's see what we can do to get you to where you can capture a likeness yourself. We're going to be talking about several things that involve the face, and hopefully our visit will true up some of your skills in drawing some faces. Okay, the first thing we want to tackle is features, and the first feature we'll talk about will be the eye. I'm going to start with a tear duct right here. Swing up, and then make a quick descent. That would represent the top of the eyelid. I'm going to finish out the tear duct there. Make a bottom lid that has much less of a bow than the upper lid did. Okay, now we're going to find the iris. The iris is the colored part of the eye. In order to do that, I'm going to think of an entire circle, even if part of that circle is hidden. I'm going to draw out around the lid just to ensure that that's what I've captured, is a circle. Just a nice, clean circle. Okay, in placing the iris, think of it as being partially covered on top with that upper lid. It should just about touch the bottom lid. If any white space is showing in this area at all, it should be very little. If you put a bottom lid that bows too much and you end up seeing a lot of white space, it'll have a very sad look, and that's probably not what you want to put into your portrait. Okay, let's complete the upper lid with this line on top and one on the bottom. These lines help to show the fact that really what we have is an eyeball with two flesh portions covering that. Okay, now we go to the pupil. Notice how I make the pupil. It'll be drawn as kind of a 3/4 moon. The reason I'm going to do it that way is because I want to leave the white of the paper for the highlight on the eye. We're going to make that pupil nice and dark. Now, we're going to make the colored area of the iris going out around this white space that I'm leaving for the highlight of the eye. Notice how these lines are radiating from the pupil. If you look at an eye real close, you'll notice that that is what we see. Notice how we've left that highlight. The reason the highlight exists on the eye is because there's moisture there. We all have moisture that protects our eye, and anytime you've got moisture, you're going to have a reflection. If you were drawing a frog that's just come out of the water and landed on a lily pad, there's going to be moisture on that frog. Consequently, you'll put little dabs of white of paint, and you'll capture the highlights that are on that wet surface of the frog. So make sure you put a highlight on the eye. That will help show the truth that we have an eye that's slightly moist. Now, to complete this iris, I'm going to darken the edges. Notice how as I do so, it starts to look even more realistic. Going all the way around, darkening those edges. Now let's beef up this line of the upper eyelid. Notice that I'm just making it thicker, and that will start to show the eyelashes. I'm only going to indicate a few eyelashes, not too many. We don't want it looking hokey. Beginners often times throw in these long eyelashes and it tends to look real strange. Okay, I'm thickening the bottom lid now. I'm not going to take it all the way across because that's where those eyelashes end, is about right there. Throw a few off there. Not many, just a few will tell the story. Okay, now the upper lid actually hangs over just a fraction of an inch, but it's enough to cast a shadow. So I'm going to draw a slight shadow across the iris. In fact, very lightly, I'm going to draw a cast shadow around the eye. And that makes it look even more natural. Now, people often, whenever they draw or paint an eye, they'll leave the eye just lily white. And that's a mistake because, well, it's a cliche. You've heard it said, don't shoot till you see the whites of their eyes. Well, sure, an eye is white, but actually in shadow it may even be more like a light gray. So don't make an eye pure white. Use maybe your finger just ever so lightly across that eyeball so that it can show that it's not pure lily white. It's got a slight curve to it, and because of that curve, we'll have a little more shadow on one side of the eye than we will on the other. So I'm making that eye just a little less than white. A few shading lines around, and we're done. Before we finish with eyes, let me show you what is often some mistakes that beginners make, and by doing so I think you'll be able to glean some important facts. Beginners will make an eye look almond-shaped, like that. First off, you notice I didn't do that. Instead of making a straight almond, we went up and then made a gradual descent, and then this bowed and then came up to meet the upper lid. We didn't just make an almond. Next, beginners will not think of the eye as something that's circular. They'll just come in here and draw lines like that. What if these lines were allowed to continue? You see, we don't have a circle, we've got an oval. They'll draw eyelashes like this all the way around. That's a mistake. So, eyelashes are just slight indications. We're thickening this line, and that makes it look much more natural. Okay. Practice eyes. You must do them well. They are the window to the soul, and if an eye looks wrong, the whole picture looks very wrong. Okay, let's now talk about the nose. I'm drawing the bridge of the nose right here, coming straight down. The end of the nose could either be a circle, it could be a square, or it could be a diamond shape, depending on the person you're drawing. In this case, I'm going to make it somewhat of a diamond shape. I'm finding the nostril openings right now, and then indicating the outer side of the nostril. I'm going to assume that the light is coming from this direction. That would give me a slight shadow over on this side. It would give me a shadow over on this nostril, and it might even be giving me a cast shadow from the nose. Darkening, reinforcing that black that indicates the nostril opening, and I'm just letting value turn the form. And we have completed our nose. Now, if we were painting a nose, we would want to make sure that we've indicated a highlight on the nose. That highlight may occur right there. Again, let's talk about common pitfalls that beginners fall into when they're drawing a nose. Two lines of equal size, equal weight, pig-like nostrils. They aren't really looking at what the nostril looks like. They just know that there's some openings there, so they draw these big openings, and then they come out for some nostrils. The difference between this and this is simply I've indicated a darker side instead of making both sides of equal weight. Instead of making raw openings like we'd find on a pig, we see them from a more foreshortened view, and therefore they're more like ellipses. And we've taken a good, careful look as to how those wings of the nostril fit around the opening. Okay. Let me talk a little bit about different types of noses that you'll see, and I think drawing some from a profile will help. Some people have a hook nose. In other words, occurring at that spot would be that kind of a bump. Some people have more of a ski jump nose. See, here's our little skier. Some people have a nose that's turned down. Some people have a nose that's turned up. People that have a nose that's turned up might have a more innocent look to them because that's what all little children have. All little children have these noses. I mean, that's what mine looks like. See, I look half my age because I've got this nose that never did drop down. Normally, I think what happens is gravity kind of pulls and tugs till that nose gets down, and by the time a person's 80, you know, they're wearing this thing down on their upper lip. So that's what happens with age. That nose drops down, and little kids have a turned up nose. So those are the different nose types. Study noses wherever you go. You see people, you see photographs, different types of noses. Learn how to draw each type. Okay. Now we have to cover mouths. We'll start with the upper lip, and we're making a smashed M. In other words, here's an M, there's a flattened out M. Completing that with the bottom portion of that upper lip. Then the bottom lip. Bottom lips, this may vary from person to person, but bottom lips are generally thicker than upper lips, and they're generally shorter. These are more elongated. Notice that we have this bow taking place right there. It's been referred to as Cupid's bow. It's just that groove that works its way up to the nose. Now let's shade this to demonstrate the fact that in most lighting situations, the upper lip is going to be darker than the bottom lip. The reason that is because the upper lip is on an angle away from the light. The bottom lip is on an angle facing the light. Therefore, the bottom lip will be lighter than the upper lip. Now, in the event that the light was coming from the ground up, the reverse would be true. Notice I've left a little highlight right on the bottom lip. Again, a highlight to represent some moistness, and you may wish to have that on the lips that you draw, especially if it's like a fashion model that has lipstick that looks quite trendy. Reinforcing some of the darks that we see on that upper lip. Now the lips have little lines. Put them in, but put them in very gingerly. Don't overdo those lines. Just make it look nice and natural. A little darker around the edges here where the lips would be going away from the light. What I've indicated with this dark area right here is a cast shadow that would be cast by the bottom lip. We can come in, pump in what would be referred to as accents. They're just your darkest darks that always give any kind of a drawing that last touch. A few more lines. And we're done. When you draw lips, notice whether they are long or short, thick or thin. Is the bottom lip thicker than the upper lip, or is the reverse true? These are all things that are going to pertain to this specific person, and you'll need to watch for those to capture that likeness. Okay, last but certainly not least is the ear. Let's draw the ear by indicating like a C shape. Then we'll come in with an inner line. Let that swing out around so that we can start to form the area of the opening of the ear. All right, here's the opening, so we'll beef that up with a darker line. And then we'll just do some subtle shading that would show how those forms are turned inside that ear. Ears are really not tough to draw. All you need to do is just look at them. Take a good, solid look. They're something that's not readily noticeable. We don't stare at ears the way we stare at eyes. So an ear can be off a little bit and not be quite so noticeable, unlike the eye, which has got to be dead on or else it really looks strange. So we can be a little bit looser, freer with the ear. Don't let ears scare you. They're not that tough. Okay, that completes the features. Practice them. If you can get people to sit for you while you draw just the features, they'll just be feature studies. Or photographs if you don't have anybody who'll sit for you. Just draw features, get those down well, and then you'll be ready for proportions. Okay, you've learned features, you've practiced them. Now you got to know where to put those features. They have to be aligned in a certain place, or no matter how well drawn those individual features are, if they're not in correct proportion, they'll look off. So let's talk about some important proportion tips. First thing I'm going to want to do is draw the overall shape of the head. And I'm going to do that with a basic egg shape. You know, if we can bypass all the detail that a head has, all the hair, all the eyelashes, all the wrinkles, if we can just boil it down to what that basic shape is, an egg shape, it makes the head much more manageable. Because with a little practice, anybody can draw an egg shape. Okay, the next step, a line running vertically through the egg, dead center. We'll be drawing a straight view face. The next line will be running horizontally It is located exactly half from the top of the head to the chin. Halfway, we're going to make a horizontal line. The reason we do this is now we can place the eyes, nose, and mouth on these lines that we've set up, these construction lines. If we didn't draw those lines first, we may have an eye up here and another eye down here, a nose that's cocked off on an angle, a mouth that isn't centered. With these construction lines, we can find correct placements of the features. Okay, now, to place the eyes, we're not going to detail anything right now. We're just going to indicate where the eye belongs. Notice I'm just making little increments right now. In other words, if the eye was to fit inside those two increments, that really what I'm indicating is that's the tear duct and that's the end of the eye. Just indicating where they're going to fit along this horizontal line. Okay, here's a truth. If we take the width of the eye, we have another eye width between the two eyes. Okay, so that helps you to place the eyes correctly, so you haven't got them too far apart or too close together. Now, there should also be an eye width between the corner of the eye and the side of the head. So that here's what we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 eye widths to the length of the face. Now, once we have the eyes in there, it's pretty easy to locate the eyebrows. They'll just be above the head, above the eyes. Once we have the eyebrows located, here's another nifty trick. From the eyebrows to the chin, what's half? The bottom of the nose. Okay, the bottom of the nose is located halfway from the eyebrow to the chin. Now, if we were to take that same measurement and go up another one, that would be where the scalp line occurs, the widow's peak. So that we have broken the face down into what's called a 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 breakdown. Now, conveniently enough, the ears lie inside that middle third. In other words, the ear is the same distance from the bottom of the nose to the top of the eyebrow. So we'll just indicate the ears as such. Now we need to locate the mouth. From the bottom of the nose to the bottom of the chin, if we go down 1/3, we'll locate the mouth. Notice I'm not getting tight with any detail right now. I'm just finding the placements of these features. Now, another trick that you may wish to have under your belt is the fact that on many people, from the bottom of the chin to the eyebrows, in other words, 2 of those thirds, should be about the distance of the length of the head this way. So in other words, the face should fit into almost a perfect square. Okay, we have these indications for the eyes. Let's go ahead and draw the eyes in. Again, we're not going to get into too much detail because anything could be messed up at any point, and if we've spent a lot of time on one thing, we'll be very reluctant to erase it. All we're after is placement. Not detail, just placement. Okay, we've indicated the eyes. Let's indicate the pupils, because we find that if we take a line straight down from the pupil, we'll hit the corners of the mouth. That's how you can keep the mouth from either being too short or too long. We have our tear duct here. If we come straight down, that's the nostrils. So now we can indicate the nose. Okay, got that? Straight line from the tear duct down, we hit the nostril. Straight line down from the pupil, we hit the corners of the mouth. Little measurement tricks that make drawing faces much easier. Now, most people do not have quite this round of a jaw, and so what we can do is put some straight lines in on top of the curved line that exists there now. As you're drawing someone's face, watch where this break occurs. From there, up. That break, I'll draw an arrow so you know what I mean. Where does it occur in relation to the corner of the mouth? It may be high, it may be low. That will depend on the person. We can go ahead and just mass in the hair. We always let the hair go out above the top of the head. In other words, if that's the cranium, there's going to be some extra space before we hit the top of the hair. Okay. The important things to remember with the proportions is that the eyes are located halfway from the bottom of the chin to the top of the head. The reason that's important to remember is because almost to a man, beginners tend to make eyes higher. And the reason they do that is it's an interesting reason. What's going on from the eyebrow down is quite interesting, isn't it? We've got the eyes that are sparkly and alive. We've got the nose that's always interesting. Some people have very interesting noses that might flare up when they get mad. And there's the mouth and the teeth. Mouths are in motion, and so we tend to zero in on those. Fun stuff going on right here. Hey, what's going on right here? Boring. So, what do? We shortchange those areas that aren't quite so interesting. So, consequently, people put the eyes way too high, shortchange the cranium, and they commit what I call the Neanderthal mistake. In other words, they've chopped off the cranium subconsciously because that's boring stuff. Eyes are halfway. Okay, let's do a side view so that we can learn some proportions if we're doing a profile. I'm going to draw just a square. Now I'm going to divide that square into 4 equal parts. Now inside that square, I'll draw the shape of a profile head. Can you see how that thing's starting to take shape? Okay, this line, since we know it's halfway from the top of the head to the chin, obviously that's where we're going to indicate the eyes. And the eyebrows. Once we've got that, we know that halfway down we find the nose. A third down, we find the lips. Okay, this line we drew vertically, that will be the line in which we'll attach the ear. How do we find the ear lengthwise? Remember, top of the eyebrow, bottom of the nose, and that's where we can place this ear. This is interesting. This is interesting. What about the area between here and there? What about the area between the ear and the back of the head? Boring. What do beginners do? Maybe they'll draw something like this. I'll greatly exaggerate it so you understand what I mean. Cartoons can get away with it. Portraits can't. Don't shortchange the cranium. Don't shortchange this area. Just because it's not as interesting as this doesn't mean it should be left out. it's just as important as the facial features. Okay, what we've talked about is general average proportions, just kind of a cross-section of what most people look like. It does not mean that everybody's going to fall into these norms. If you know the norms, you can judge the person on how they differ from those norms, and thus be more likely to capture their likeness. Okay? Next thing we'll talk about will be head types. Okay, now we get into the fun stuff. The reason this is fun is because we're now going to deviate from finding out what everybody looks like and start to personalize the sketches, starting to look for what makes that person look unique. In other words, we're looking for head types. Okay, the first head type we have, here we have a girl that has a round face. And so the marks that we make on our paper to begin with will have a more circular feeling to it. Notice how I'm making an oval, but it's almost full circle, because I want to capture that full round face. I notice that the temples come in, and that's a adjustment that I could make on top of the oval that I've already drawn. The next thing I'm going to do is mass in the hair. Notice that I'm not getting caught up with any individual strands. I mean, hair is made up of thousands of individual strands, and oftentimes beginners tend to go for those strands when they should be looking for the overall shape of that hair. That's all we're after now, just the overall shape. Okay, now we notice that the eyebrows turn this way. Some people's go in the opposite direction, maybe upwards, but hers go from the bridge downwards. So we're going to kind of slap that in, almost in a caricature-like fashion. It's been said that every good portrait is a bit of a caricature. Just little indications for the eyes. Thick eyelids, well, partially because she's looking downwards, but we'll indicate that. The nose has a circular look to it. I often find that if people have a blocked out head, they have a kind of a block-shaped nose. A round head, kind of a round nose. The features all kind of belong into the same shape families. Now I notice that her upper lip is quite thin. The bottom lip is quite thick. And I can make some adjustments here at the jawline. I notice now I need to come in here ever so slightly because her face isn't that round, but at least as long as I thought quite round in the beginning, I was on the right track. This is a very important phase of your drawing because it's going to capture the individual person. It's going to start to say what's unique about them. And in just a few lines, we've captured a likeness. If you've not captured a likeness in just a few lines, you'll be tempted to try and make detail capture the likeness. It will never work. Those few lines capturing the overall shape of the face, the placement of the features, going for those things that make that person unique, that carries the portrait. No amount of detail will save a bad drawing that's poorly constructed in the beginning. So this is a very important phase. Okay, let's try another head type, just so you'll see just how individual we really are. Okay, this head type is quite a diversion from the last one we had because it's much more blocky, more angular. Perhaps the first lines that I'm going to lay down in drawing this fellow is an elongated rectangle. Sure, there's going to be a lot of adjustments taking place on top of that, but if I can state the basic head type, this blocky rectangular feeling in the beginning, boy, it'll sure go a long way in helping me capture a likeness. Okay, I'm going to start to indicate the hair as it comes out, the dip in of the temples. The hair, the forehead right here feels quite circular as opposed to the other angular portions of the face. That's real angular there. Let's keep it that way. Angular here, angular here. The ears lie fairly flat against the side of the head. They don't stick out very far. Okay, we'll indicate the placement of the eyes. You know, I don't have to get too detailed with those eyes to capture a likeness. The placement will do it. These eyebrows dip slightly downwards also, just the same way that the previous girl did. The nose is quite long, just indicating its placement. People with beards and mustaches are really easier to draw than people without, because they're just shapes that you're going to block in there. Both the upper and the bottom lip quite thin, so we'll keep it thin. Blocking in the shape here, finishing off with this part of the beard. Looking to see if there's any more refinements that could be taking place in this very preliminary stage. I'm going to re-emphasize the roundness here. Drawing this widow's peak. Continue to shape out the hair, and hopefully at this stage I've captured a likeness. It didn't take a lot of detail to capture a likeness. Just general placements and finding the head type. See, didn't take a lot of detail, just the basics. Okay, let's top off our head type study with one more face. Now there's an interesting face, isn't it? This lady's quite a character. She would tar and feather me if she knew how this picture turned out. She'll never know. Okay, but I wanted to use it because we've got quite an interesting shape type here. It's actually a diamond shape. So that's what I'm going to emphasize with my first few lines, is kind of a diamond shape. It's those cheeks that are giving the peak this way. Okay, now the hair is quite interesting. It's lying flat against the side of the head, and then up here we can block in just a box. The ears are lying very much flat against the head. In fact, you can barely see them, if at all. That's part of the person. We need to capture that or we've missed it. Okay. Let's indicate the placement of these eyes. The eyelids are quite thick, and that's partially due to the fact that she was midway through a blink when the shutter went off. But she had thick eyelids anyway, so we need to get those in. Otherwise, we've missed her likeness. Some people have thick eyelids. Some people have very thin ones. Now, unlike the previous two, her eyebrows point upwards. So we need to capture that. And they're quite thick. Short, thick. Okay, straight down with the nose. Her nose points down. Remember how we talked about some noses point up, some point down? Hers looks like gravity's done its thing with the bottom of that nose. It's pointed down. Okay. Straight line across for the mouth. You know, we could get caught up in a lot of detail here. No reason to. If we could just indicate with some very basic lines what's going on, we'll be in good shape. I'll just lightly indicate the lines that are made when a person's smiling. At this stage, it better kind of say her. Otherwise, no amount of detail is going to save this drawing. A little bit of fine-tuning. It's almost a caricature at this stage. Sure, you can fine-tune the thing a little bit more. And that would prevent it from being too much of a caricature. But if you can overemphasize some of these prominent features in the beginning, you'll be less likely to overlook them later. Okay, so you got that basic triangular shape, or diamond shape that is. That's what we mean by head types. Is it a square? Is it a circle? Is it an oval? Is it like an ice cream cone shape? Is it like an upside down ice cream cone where it's very thin at the top and gets larger down here? What type of head type does the person have you wish to draw? Get that down first, and then you'll be hitting the ground running. Okay, we're ready for a final demonstration. Okay, final demonstration now. Let's put together the things that we've learned, see how all that information comes together into a final piece. Okay, on this head, I'm going to take a look at it. I'm not going to draw it just yet. I want to categorize it into a face type. It seems angular, particularly at the top, but is more round as we get around the jaw. I would say I would be thinking angular with this face type. That's my first and foremost thought. But I will modify some of those angles with the curve I see going on down here. I'm going to lightly indicate the ear, the hair. Really, all I'm doing at this stage is just what you saw me do in our head type stage. Some basic shape that tells me what the head is. Light indications of the hair. I'm just massing it in. Beginners love to zero in on detail. You've got to avoid that detail. You've got to just sock down some major lines that are going to say what that person looks like. You know, if you're looking at this person from 20 feet away, or if you had your eyes squinted so tight that you could barely see through the lids, you wouldn't see any detail. You'd just see some basic shapes. That's what we want to get. The type of basic shapes you'd see if you were quite a distance from the person, or if you were squinting, so that you've reduced all the details. Okay, boy, that basic shape stage is so important. I'm going to look, make sure I get it right. By the way, I ought to tell you what I'm using here. I've got smooth newsprint paper. If you buy newsprint, Please don't buy the rough. It's just worthless stuff. Smooth is so much better. And I'm using a charcoal pencil. Okay, indicating the eyes, I'm going to draw that center line. Remember how when we learned proportions we had a center line? This head isn't staring at us straight on, it's slightly off. So that's why it's important that we make this center line slightly off to indicate that it's a little bit of a 3/4. Okay, this line across here gives us the alignment for the eyes. Notice no detail on the eyes yet. It's going to be real tempting to zero in on some detail. Resist the temptation. Indications of the eyebrows. It's quite a long nose. I'm going to indicate it about right there. Indicate the mouth. Make sure I've got room for that chin. No reason we can't start to make some indications as to the tie and jacket and shirt. Everything's developing together. Notice we haven't really zeroed in on any one spot too early. It all develops together. Okay, at this stage I'm being very careful to make sure things are aligned right. I think I've got that nose too long. I've got to bring it up. Noticing that the eyebrows have a downward slant to them, indicating where the pupils are going to go, or rather the irises. Bridge of the nose, straight down, the side of the nose, indications, placements. Nothing detailed yet. These are the lines that occur when a person smiles. When they're smiling, it pushes the flesh back, and that's why those lines take place. Indicating where the top lip would go, bottom lip would go. These lips are quite thin. Okay, I want to emphasize how the cheeks come out like so. Part of our head type alignments. Stage that's also important. That's what captures a likeness, is boy, that general shape of the head. Hope I've left enough room here for the chin. You can see why we're staying light and free and non-detailed, because we're going to be making lots of adjustments along the way. If you make a mistake like I did there, don't bother erasing it. You can just come back and draw the right line on top of it. You'll notice later as we shade it won't make any difference because that'll get covered up quick enough. Okay, still getting the basic shape of the head. I notice that the forehead works quite well as a angular block shape. The hair is really very important part of the overall shape of the head. Plus they're easy shapes to spot and draw. So we'll make sure that the hair is not neglected. A lot of people when they draw portraits start with an eye, detail it, then move on to the other eye and detail it, go to the mouth and detail it, and the whole thing just spreads outwards like cancer that just... That's not the way professionals draw. They make sure that that eye, that nose, that ear is placed correctly. See, I've got that ear a little bit high because I've now got to make sure it aligns itself with the eyebrow. So we'll drop the ear down so slightly, align it with the bottom of the nose. Okay, I'm looking for some major angles now. There's an angle. There's an angle. There's an angle. Across the bottom here. Angle across the bottom here. The reason we look for angles is because if there's a gentle curve. That's difficult to spot. An angle is much more easy to spot and draw. If those angles need to be turned into curves later, great. They can do that. Okay, I think I've got to reduce the forehead a bit. I've got to make sure it works in this stage. This is such an important stage. Believe me, through my training, I tried to make portraits work by detail. I thought, oh, the basic shape's just not working for me. Well, it'll work when I get detail on. It'll look right. No, it won't. If this stage isn't working, it will not look right. Okay, I'm going to start indicating where the eye goes in a more refined fashion. Still not getting too much detail, but I am refining from just the 2 dots that I had previously. Finding the shadow side of this nose. I'm looking for the angles as the nostrils angle up, like that. Starting to indicate some shadows, and we'll be doing more shadows in just a minute. In fact, let's sock in a few now. There's a shadow around that eye, staying real loose. Shadow around this eye. And down the forehead. Now the neat thing about the charcoal is that if you make a mistake, your eraser can come along and that mistake can be history before you know it. So don't feel timid and tight as you draw. No reason why you can't clean up mistakes as you work. The important thing is to be pretty free, pretty loose. Notice that I've been working also on the side of my pencil. You know, pencils aren't specifically designed to go for the point. You can work on the side. That helps me to avoid the detail. When I knew that I was a detail freak and had to get over it, I started working with the pencil on the side. And you can't do too much detail with your pencil like that. You've got to work with some broad lines and broad tones. And so that forced me away from that vicious habit of drawing detail too early. Constantly looking, making sure that things are where I want them to be. One thing that we won't have an opportunity to do, but that I would recommend that you do, and that's get away from your portrait at this stage. You know, go have a coffee break or whatever. Come back and look at it, and you'll see it in a fresh new light that'll enable you to spot some problems. Shadow down there, shadow there, and here. We're molding this like a sculptor would start to mold a picture. Okay, now turning my pencil onto the point, I'm going to start making some refinements. Now when we're ready to get some of this tight detail in, we can use the point. Across the upper lip, we're noticing the spacing between the upper lip and the nose. Slight part in the mouth. We don't see too much teeth here, but as long as I'm on teeth, let me mention one important point. A lot of people have a tendency to make piano keys out of their teeth. In other words, they're indicating every gap between each tooth. What that'll look like is that they'll have gunk between their teeth, or else they're spaced too wide. So avoid that common mistake. Again, turning the pencil on the side, I can start to carve out some of these planes. Getting quite bold and gutty now with some of these darks. In fact, I ought to start socking in the hair. Remember how we don't develop any one area above the other? It all comes up together. I can come back and make lines inside that massing, but at least I've got a basic bold tone down for that hair. Okay, coming in for some refinement around the eye. The placement of the eye is the most important thing, but once that eye is placed, you've got to make sure that the details are very carefully put in there. Okay, beefing up the shadow area there. And I still better go darker here and put in this eye. Remember that iris is round. See that roundness? Leave a little spot for the highlight. Putting in some more darks, we can start to indicate some halftones around. Now, one quick point on the lines for an older person is be very careful how many lines you put in. If you put in too many lines, it'll give them way too much age. I can use my finger to indicate some halftones. Okay, unfortunately, our time is just about up, but I think you get the general idea as to what we're after. No area gets developed above the other. It all comes up together. Placement first, detail second. Okay, it's going to take practice. Stick with it. Hang in there. We'll see you.